Now, united in shock, Israelis have come together to back their military, who are now massing on the border with Gaza ahead of an expected land incursion. And today, Prime Minister Netanyahu and his political rival Benny Gantz announced that they would form an emergency government to handle this crisis. Meanwhile, in the communities along the border with Gaza, the grim task of retrieving bodies continues after the attack by Hamas, which is a proscribed terrorist group in the UK. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Sikandar Kamani, has been to Be'eri, where one of the worst massacres occurred, and his report does contain distressing images.
Burnt out, abandoned cars by the roadside. All that's left of a mass killing at a music festival. We're following the Israeli army, heading into another devastated village. This is the kibbutz of Be'eri. It's one of the worst affected small communities here along the border with Gaza. More than 100 bodies, more than 100 Israeli civilians killed here. The bodies of the attackers still lie on the ground. The vehicles they used still here too. Their powerful machine guns trained on ordinary families.
More than 200 terrorists, hundreds of them killed in the kibbutz. But you know, it's not a war, it's not a battlefield, it's a massacre.
Inside a home in the nearby town of Ofakim, bullet holes and bloodstains are everywhere. David and his wife were held hostage for 18 hours by 5 Hamas militants.
They said in the morning, we will put a bullet in your head, but at 2:30 the military came. We hid there, and here was a gunfight, shots, bullets, grenades. How we came out of this alive, I don't know.
CCTV cameras captured gunmen marauding around the neighborhood and opening fire. Inside their home, David's wife Raquel tried to talk them down.
I told them, we're brothers. Why are you doing this? We should make peace. He said, we're not brothers. I'm a martyr. And he put a gun to my husband's head.
It was terrifying. Hamas had brutally gunned down hundreds of ordinary Israelis. But at times here, it was also surreal. Like when the militants demanded food and a neighbor dropped off chicken and rice.
We gave them Coke Zero, and they said, no, we want Diet Coke. He asked me, do you know this famous Israeli singer? And I said, yes. He started singing. My wife sang with him. We sang together, and suddenly their minds changed.
You met these people responsible for such horrific violence. What did you think of them? Are they monsters or who are they?
They are terrorists who came to kill us, but I turned it around, offered them food and drink, treated their wounds as if they were my guests.
Israel is a country in mourning. More Israelis were killed here on Saturday than throughout the whole of the long and bloody Second Intifada. This is also a country that wants revenge. In the distance, plumes of smoke from the bombardment of Gaza. Britain's Foreign Secretary was today in Ofakim to show his solidarity with the victims of the Hamas attack. Horrific scenes here. Also grim scenes in Gaza. I wonder, do you have any concerns about the nature and scale of the Israeli response to this awful attack? Many people do across the world.
Well, I've said back when I was in the UK that, of course, Israel has a right to self-defense, and, of course, Israel has a right to try and regain those people who have been kidnapped. When I was in Israel a few weeks ago, of course, we discussed the security situation. We discussed Israel's work to minimise civilian casualties. But of course, what we do know is that Hamas habitually embeds its military its military capabilities, its terrorist capabilities within civilian populations. What we want to see is as few casualties as possible.
Is that
of
happening?
course.
Hundreds of children have died. There's blockade on fuel.
We actually lost 1,200 people that murdered young people in the dancing party that they were shooting, entire family that murdered one by one, innocent people. We are living close to monsters, to inhuman people. And we are fighting for our home, and we will win. Thank you. We will continue.
Back in Berry, there's now a huge military presence. Many of the soldiers here will likely soon head to Gaza. Some will die, many more Palestinians will too. But as the Israelis see it, this attack leaves them no choice. Well, today, as you've been hearing, Israel has formed a wartime unity government, bringing in some senior opposition figures, somewhat sidelining some of the most extreme right-wing figures within the ruling coalition. For many years now in Israel, it's become increasingly difficult to have a real conversation about negotiations with the Palestinians, about addressing some of their grievances. And in light of this horrific attack, which has left Israel with really a sense of collective trauma, it's going to be even more difficult. There's very little public appetite for talk of peace. In the past, Israel has referred to its frequent smaller scale flare-ups with Hamas in Gaza, sometimes in retaliation for rockets being fired out from there, as mowing the lawn, airstrikes. That's a reference to airstrikes that they would carry out targeting Hamas's military capabilities, mowing the lawn meaning something they would have to do every now and again. But now the conversation is very different. It's about eliminating the threat from Hamas. We'll have to see if that's possible and what the price of it will be.
Sikandar, thanks very much indeed. Well, this afternoon, the electricity went off in Gaza when the only power station ran out of fuel as the Israeli total siege began to bite. And meanwhile, the aerial bombardment of the Gaza Strip has continued unabated, with over 1,000 casualties, most of them civilians. Well, some of the hospitals there have been turned into shelters for the desperate civilians who've been kicked out of their homes, have had to flee their homes, and are trying to find any place to shelter. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, now reports, and beware, there are also distressing images in her report.
The ambulance sirens never stop, nor the desperate attempt to save those who might survive the relentless Israeli bombardment of Khan Yunis camp in Gaza. Adrenaline keeps them running, keeps them trying to rescue anyone they can. The children, of course, the children more than anyone. Don't be scared, he tells his daughters, don't be scared. The Israelis say they're not targeting civilians. But where should civilians go? Yes, there might have been Hamas fighters hiding here. There probably were. But the destruction is total. The bombs do not discriminate. And Israeli hostages are under this bombardment too. We don't know where they're being held. They've run out of room for patients at Al-Shifa Hospital. But of course they'll take more because there's no choice. Only a little fuel is left for the generator, and Israel has blocked resupply. Medicines, dressings, everything is running low. The children are mute with shock, or whimpering in pain and terror. Outside the hospital, amongst the bodies, Alaa Al-Kafane, alone now. He has lost his pregnant wife, father, brother, uncle, 2 cousins, and 2 members of his extended family.
We received a message to leave Beit Hanun town, so we went to beach refugee camp. They had threatened the building we were in, so we're looking for safety in the beach camp, but the building we were in was also threatened. So we had to move to Sheikh Radwan town, where we stayed in an apartment. Suddenly, around 4 a.m., a strike hit us. We don't know why. We've done nothing.
terror from the skies, skeins of white smoke that fall in an arc. Without tests on the ground, experts can't confirm that this is the incendiary weapon white phosphorus. And the Israelis deny they're using it, but they have done in the past. Contact with water doesn't quench the heat, and if launched into populated areas, it would give people horrendous burns. It's hard to imagine how anything could be left in the ruins. But if you have almost nothing, you retrieve what you can. And you think, who to blame? Hamas? The Israelis? Governments that pay only lip service to the lives of Palestinians?
We don't blame the Jews. We blame the corrupt Arab regimes from the Gulf to the ocean. The Arab regimes are all corrupt. The Palestinian people are steadfast on their land. No matter how long it takes, we must return to our country.
Gazans gather in a UN school, hoping to be safe for the night. And the children, for a moment, play. As all children, Palestinian or Israeli, should be allowed to do.
Lindsay Hilson reporting. Well, joining me now is Mark Regev, the former Israeli ambassador to the UK, who is once again serving as an advisor to the Prime Minister here, Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Regev, thank you very much for coming on the programme and taking time to do so. Is the formation of this unity government, this war cabinet, a clear sign that an incursion by Israeli troops into the Gaza Strip is imminent?
Well, I think you should see the formation of the new national unity government, and it's still possible that more members of the opposition will join the new coalition, because it is a time when national unity is required. You'll recall, and you've done reports about this, that Israeli politics has over the last few months been very polarized, very cantankerous. And I think if we can say anything good about all the horror that we've been through over the last few days, is that I think maybe it was a slap in the face for Israelis, that we have to understand that what divides us, and we have very robust political debates in this country, but ultimately the threats out there, they don't care who you vote for, they don't care if you're left or right or centre, they want to kill us, and we should unite in meeting this common threat.
Right. I've spoken to lots of Israelis, including those who've got hostages in the Gaza Strip. They are furious with your Prime Minister. They think that he took his eye off the ball before the attacks on Saturday. He was far too concerned about saving his own political skin to live up to his former name of Mr. Security. And also, he's been pretty invisible, frankly, in the last few days. What do you say to those criticisms?
Well, Israelis are free to criticize. We are an open and democratic country. But I think if you actually looked at the polling, you'd see there really is strong support for a national unity government. And I think Israelis understand that this is a time for them to be together and to unify to meet the common threats. Obviously, mistakes were made. I mean, as an Israeli, we've always prided ourselves on having a very excellent intelligence service. And here we were taken by surprise. And there are allegations that the army wasn't quick enough in its initial response. That has to be looked into. That will be investigated. We have to see what lessons need to be learned.
Let's look at Israel's actions in the Gaza Strip. The bombing of mosques, of apartment blocks, the killing of civilians. Despite the understandable anger of what happened in your country on Saturday morning because of Hamas, that does look to many people like collective revenge.
I believe it's crucial that Israel respond forcibly, not only because what happened to us was unacceptable, and Hamas has to understand that we will no longer live side by side with a terrorist organization that tries to butcher our people. But Israel has other enemies in the region, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to Iran just over the horizon. And they have to understand that if you strike against Israel, if you murder our people, you will pay a price. We live in a very dangerous neighborhood, and Israel has to be strong, and Israel, while holding one hand out for peace, and we do want peace, but if you attack us, you will pay a price, and that's a crucial message for us to send.
Right, but why should children pay a price? Why should pregnant mothers pay a price? I mean, the danger here is that you're just going to continue the cycle of violence that has defined politics in this part of the world for so long.
I beg to disagree. I think your analysis is incorrect. Hamas is the enemy of peace and reconciliation. Hamas says openly they're against Israel in any borders. Hamas says openly we will kill every Jew we can find, and they showed that very clearly on Saturday morning. Hamas says openly that any Arab who signs a peace treaty with Israel is a traitor to Islam and to the Arab cause. Actually, by defeating Hamas, we're making, I think, creating an opportunity, a space for peace to happen.
But you're not just defeating Hamas, you're also killing many innocent civilians. It looks very Old Testament, an eye for an eye.
Look, I think in fairness, there hasn't been a conflict in modern history where you haven't seen civilian casualties. And we regret civilian casualties, but the idea that because Hamas has taken over Gaza and has turned it into a base of terror to launch attacks against our people, that we can't defend ourselves, that's ridiculous.
And just very briefly, if you do go into the Gaza Strip, if you take over, who's going to run the place? Because the last time you ran it, you decided that it didn't work out for either you or them and you had to get out.
Well, that's the whole point that I think has to be said, that why Hamas doesn't want peace. People forget that in 2005, Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip. We took down all the settlements and we pulled back to the 1967 lines. And so according to the theory that is often espoused in university campuses and in all sorts of places, if we go to the 67 lines and take down the settlements, we're supposed to get peace, are we not? What have we received in return? What have we received in return? Ruthless, barbaric violence.
Okay, got to leave it there. Mark Regev, thank you very much indeed. Well, earlier I talked to Amjad Shawa in Gaza. He's director of the Palestinian non-governmental organizations in the Gaza Strip, and I asked him to describe the situation today.
It's a very horrible situation that we are in now. Just now, I heard of the bombardment of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, which is responsible of saving the lives. It's the biggest hospital in Gaza. There is 3 medical teams were killed while they're in their ambulance. It's very catastrophic conditions we are in. I evacuated my home after warning one of the buildings in the neighborhood. I couldn't imagine that one day that I live with my family in such conditions. We are living second by second, minute by minute, and we are counting these minutes.
So without electricity, without water, without fuel, without internet, without telephones, what life is there left in Gaza?
I'm someone who catch the hope all the time. I'm working for NGOs, and all the time I'm telling the people in Gaza there is some hope in the end of the tunnel, and it looks there is no tunnel, no hope in such conditions that we are in. It's something difficult that we are passing through.
It's been suggested by the Israeli government that you should leave, and some have said that you should go to Egypt. Are you afraid that they're trying to basically push you out of the Gaza Strip altogether?
I have to tell the Israelis and everyone that we will not leave. We will stay. And this is, when I evacuated my home, I was obliged because I have my elder mother with me. So we moved back and came back to our homes. We will never, ever moved from our Gaza. This is Gaza. This is our homeland, and we will not leave Gaza. And we'll catch on that someone will act immediately to stop such craziness, to stop these airstrikes. And there is no distinguish between civilians, all under attack.
Amjad Shawa, thank you very much indeed, and good luck to you and your family.
Thank you.
Now, in recent times, it's been the violent confrontations between Israeli settlers and Palestinians in the West Bank, not Gaza, that has occupied the headlines. Now the West Bank, just round the corner from here, is playing host to Gazans expelled from Israel, destitute and desperate about the safety of their families back in the Gaza Strip. Pink candy floss on the streets of Ramallah. The West Bank feels like a parallel universe today. While Jerusalem is deserted and Gaza is being reduced to rubble, here the streets are brim with activity. But any normality is a fool's gold, and there is no escape from the gathering storm. A nearby school has been turned into a refugee camp for hundreds of Palestinian labourers from Gaza who've been kicked out by the Israelis, perhaps because they're seen as a potential threat. First, the frantic paperwork of lost documents. This is the Palestinian condition. Endless bureaucracy without a state they can call their own. And then a life of limbo facing an uncertain future. For now, they have no idea how to get back to their families in Gaza, or indeed what state they're in.
The airstrikes in Gaza is very terrible and in everywhere. Inshallah.
You're worried about them?
Yes, I worry.
I don't know. It's difficult to reach our houses because of the bombing. We can't send anybody to check. It's been demolished. If you know someone who can help, please.
Ehab Besaiso has a PhD from Cardiff University and is trying to help out.
From this spot here in Ramallah, they have arrived in a very miserable condition. Some people, they have lost their mobiles, even their clothes and bags and ID cards, everything.
Yeah.
So we had to deal with really a humanitarian issue.
And their families are stuck in the Gaza Strip under bombardment.
One of them actually, he was in a very difficult situation last night because he heard that his family, they've been killed in the bombardment.
Driving past the scorched murals of Yasser Arafat, the founding father of this stillborn nation, we head in search of moderation, a very rare commodity these days. Dr. Mustafa Barghouti used to work in the Palestinian government and now advises anyone who will listen.
At this very moment, Israel imposed a total blockade on 2.2 million civilians in Gaza. They have taken 2.2 million people hostages to Israel. They're depriving them from food, from water, from electricity, and from medicine. The second thing that is happening is airstrikes. Airstrikes are vicious. They don't care. And the third plan, which is very clear, and Netanyahu said it, he said all people in Gaza must leave their homes. Where should they go to? To the sea? And then his spokesperson made it clear, the military spokesperson, who said that all people in Gaza must leave to Egypt. That means that the real Israeli plan is really to ethnically cleanse 2.2 million people in Gaza and then not bring them back, but annex it to Israel. Because that's exactly the map that Netanyahu showed in the United Nations, a map of Israel annexing West Bank.
Is that actually a plan, or is that you being paranoid?
I'm not paranoid. You can look at the map that he showed in the United Nations. I didn't invent that. And you can see the statements that he made. He said he will change the map of the region for 50 years to come.
The international community, whether it's in Washington or in London or in Berlin or in Brussels, still talks about a two-state solution. They still hold on to this. But surely that idea is dead now.
It's not only Israeli responsibility, it is also the responsibility of the United States and Europe.
But also Hamas. Hamas doesn't believe in a two-state solution. It doesn't believe Israel has the right to exist.
No, they would accept two-state solution. I know
That's not what they're saying.
I know. I've talked to them so many times. The Palestinians would have accepted two-state solution, but Israel now killed it. Killed that option with all these settlements. You're talking about 750,000 settlers now in the West Bank. Can they remove them? So the question is, if two-state solution is dead, and one apartheid state is unacceptable, I hope, to humanity, then what's the solution? The only solution, and maybe it sounds strange now under the circumstances, but I believe, I am a person of nonviolence, I believe the only solution is one democratic state where we can all live together with equal rights.
The Israeli settlements may look like innocuous gated communities, but they're illegal, defended by the Israeli army, growing in number, and they're the fuse which could blow up the West Bank. Well, President Joe Biden has today reaffirmed his commitment to Israel, saying once again that the United States has Israel's back. His words come as the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken prepares to pay a visit to Israel, promising to ensure that the country is fully prepared and equipped by the United States to handle any threat. Our Washington correspondent Siobhan Kennedy joins us now from the White House. Siobhan.
Well, Matt, I've just left the White House briefing where John Kirby, the National Security Council spokesman, gave an update on the numbers of Americans who've died in those attacks. That number is now 22, while 17, he said, 17 remain missing. Some of them presumed to have been taken hostage. The US, he said, is working around the clock to try and secure their release. John Kirby also received questions about comments from the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Republican Michael McCaul, who earlier caused something of a stir when he appeared to confirm that the US knew that Egypt had warned Israel days before the attack. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has always denied receiving that warning. But just listen to how Mr. McCaul told reporters about that today. Hear what he said.
This is an act of terror it cannot stand. We heard from the administration. There seems to have been a failure of intelligence as well. We're not quite sure how we missed it. We're not quite sure how Israel missed it. We know that Egypt had warned the Israelis 3 days prior that an event like this could happen.
Well, John Kirby was asked about those comments today, and he said, I cannot speak to specific intelligence matters. Now is not the time. He said a time will come where we look back and see if there were any intelligence gaps, but now is not that moment. On the idea that the US is working to secure a safe passage out of Gaza, we were promised some update on that. Essentially, there isn't one today. He said that those discussions were still actively ongoing between the US and Egypt and Israel. We support the idea, he said, of a safe passage, and civilians are protected by the laws of armed combat. No one, he said, wants to see any innocent lives lost.
Siobhan Kennedy, thank you very much indeed there in Washington. Well, the Hamas offensive on Saturday may have taken Israel by surprise, but it seems the entire operation was a carefully planned attack, and one that Hamas documented on video. Kieran Mudley has been looking in detail at how Hamas foiled a multi-billion-pound security system, allowing them to attack civilian areas like the Be'eri kibbutz we heard about earlier in the programme. And you may find some of the images in this report distressing.
Israel's iron wall was meant to protect its people and keep these Hamas militants out. Instead, Israelis were left virtually defenseless as gunmen broke through the fence and swept into towns like here in Kibbutz Be'eri, where after hours in control, a tenth of its population in body bags. This is the story of how terror came here and why Israel's security system failed. The Be'eri kibbutz is less than 3 miles from the border with Gaza, a strip of land often described as an open-air prison. The entire area is surrounded by Israeli-controlled border fencing, more than 30 miles long, with the main crossing, Erez, in the north. In 2021, a major $1 billion upgrade was unveiled, with the wall bolstered by motion sensors, surveillance cameras, remote-controlled machine guns, all linked by cellular communications towers like the one seen here on the right. Israel's intelligence reportedly believed this iron wall had the Hamas threat contained, with tech replacing the need for so many boots on the ground patrolling the area. But the attack on Saturday revealed fatal weaknesses at the heart of the system. At dawn, thousands of rockets were fired from Gaza and militants flew over in paragliders. Around the same time, drones armed with small bombs attacked the cell towers and targeted remote-controlled guns. With cellular signal knocked out, Israel was reportedly blind to the scale of the attack. Fighters then blew sections of the fence across the border, allowing motorbikes, trucks and bulldozers to pour through. At the Erez crossing into Israel, militants seized control of the building killing and capturing Israeli soldiers. Video posted by Hamas appears to show they encountered little resistance. It's reported a significant number of Israeli troops had recently been redirected to the occupied West Bank. And that's despite a senior American politician today saying that both US and Israeli intelligence failed to take note of a warning from Egypt about a possible attack just 3 days before this onslaught. The IDF says the fence was breached at around 30 locations. Militants reached this highway from multiple directions, and then towns and military sites along the road saw some of the deadliest attacks of the day. From Sderot in the north, down to the headquarters of the IDF's Gaza division. Reem Kibbutz and the Supernova Festival, where at least 260 people were gunned down, and then Be'eri Kibbutz, where more than 100 civilians were slaughtered, and it started with 2 militants approaching this gate at around 7 a.m. The clock says 5:55. It appears to be an hour behind. The gunmen can't get in. They hide and wait. A car approaches and the gate begins to open. The militants begin to shoot. 3 killed inside. The car still rolls forward. Hamas are now in the compound. An hour later, they return to their first victims. They drag one of the bodies out, ransack their belongings. 2 hours more, the other occupants are dragged out too, and the car is driven away. Even half an hour later, apparently still no Israeli presence, neither police nor soldiers. Instead, 2 Hamas individuals arrive and take one of the bodies.
When we went into Kibbutz Be'eri and we saw what was done to the families, to the children, that was, I'm 33 years in this position. I thought I saw everything, but something like that I never saw.
All this savagery, so anarchic yet coordinated, like this roadblock set up by the militants, all allowed to unfold over several hours, the death toll now above 1,200. In Jerusalem, they've begun burying the soldiers who were outnumbered and killed by the Hamas attack. Here on Mount Herzl, named after the writer who envisioned a Jewish state and wrote that we shall live at last as free men and in our own homes peacefully die. Words now shaken and shattered, a nation forever changed.
Kieran Woodley reporting about that. Well, let's talk now to Yosi Alfha. He's previously been a Mossad agent and an intelligence officer for the Israeli Defense Force. He now lives in Tel Aviv, where he works as a writer. Welcome to the program, sir. Just first of all, in terms of the planning of this operation, which we just heard Kieran Woodley describe in some detail, how much do you think Hamas planned this with the help of an outside power like Iran?
Look, first of all, no excuses. This is a Hamas operation planned and carried out by Hamas people. But clearly, Iran had input. What input precisely? Weapons and ordnance, without a doubt. Know-how with regard to weapons. Consultations, intense consultations in recent months in Beirut with Hamas representatives, Iranians, and Hezbollah leaders to talk about the modalities of this operation and the timing. Indeed, the model for the operation appears to have been borrowed by Hamas from Hezbollah, because Hezbollah has long been planning to carry out precisely such an operation on our northern border.
Right. And however meticulously this operation was planned and whoever helped to plan it, is the key point here that the Israeli Defense Forces and Mossad, your former employers, took their eye off the ball. They made some mistakes that allowed this to occur.
Look, the Mossad deals with intelligence abroad, and abroad does not include the Gaza Strip. Responsibility for intelligence, early warning, and other intelligence of the Gaza Strip is the Shin Bet, the domestic intelligence service. So stop blaming the Mossad. It cannot take the rap this time. But clearly, military intelligence and the Shin Bet, yes, took their eye off the ball. They missed this. They already acknowledge it. It's clear that it's going to have to be investigated intensely once the smoke has cleared, because this is a massive intelligence early warning failure.
And given the nature of this failure, and actually the damage to Israel's reputation around the world and the reputations of its forces, how much does that change Israel's security in the future?
The damage, I wouldn't define it as damage to Israel's reputation. It's damage to Israel's deterrent profile, okay? Something that's going to conceivably encourage others to attack us. And here we have to go back and recognize that that deterrent profile has been weakened over the past 9 months by the actions of the Netanyahu government in dismantling our judicial branch and by the protests within Israel, which affected the security community as well. Now you have an attack like Saturday's attack, which weakens the deterrent profile even further because the army was incapable of protecting thousands of Israeli civilians. One of the goals of the operation we're about to undertake in Gaza is to restore that deterrent profile. And it's a vital goal before others like Hezbollah and Iran are encouraged to attack us.
Right. And briefly, on that Gaza incursion, if and when it takes place, is that a bad idea? Is that luring Israel further into a trap?
Conceivably. There's a lot of concern about that. We don't know what the operational plan is, and we won't know until it's being carried out. I'm pretty confident that the security planners, and now we have a small unity cabinet with some pretty smart people in it to look at to control this operation. This is one concern, without a doubt. Not only not to fall into a trap in Gaza, but not to fall into one which gives a rationale for Hezbollah to intervene in the north. So this has to be done carefully. But on the other hand, if you don't take out the Hamas leadership, you are not restoring Israeli deterrence. You are not restoring security to this part of Israel.
Okay, going to have to leave it there. Yosi Alfha, thank you very much indeed.